They called her Hightower Hannah. Leastways, that's what folks muttered behind their hands as she passed through the dusty streets of Pine Knot, Kansas. She weren't but 18 and already stood a full head taller than most men in town, and nearly 2 over the ladies. Her dresses were all hemmed wrong, her bonnet sat awkward on her head, and she had to duck through every doorway like a full-grown draft horse. Now, Hannah didn't ask to be tall, didn't ask to outgrow every Sunday school pew, or be stared at like some traveling circus act when she fetched flour from the mercantile. But she bore it like she bore most things, quiet-like, proud-eyed, and with a spine straight as a fence post. Her ma, bless her heart, tried her best to keep Hannah feeling like she fit in. "You got sky in your bones," she'd say while brushing out Hannah's long chestnut hair. "Most folks can't handle that kind of height, not in body or spirit." Still, it got lonely being the tallest girl this side of the Mississippi. Boys didn't come calling. The preacher's wife once said Hannah should make herself smaller, like that was something she could just fold into like laundry. So Hannah spent her days working the family homestead, mending fences, chopping wood, caring for the goats with names like Margaret and Elmer. She could outrun most boys and outshoot the rest, though her pa had passed before he could teach her to ride right. She tried once, built herself a saddle tall enough to reach, but the mare near bucked her into next Tuesday. Then came the drought. The earth cracked like old leather, and her ma took sick. Hannah did what she could, patching leaks in the roof with scraps and prayers. Still, the crops withered and the debts grew tall enough to meet her eye. That's when the letter came. A neat, faded envelope addressed in careful script. To Miss Hannah Holt. Inside was a notice, a posting from a cattle outfit out in New Mexico Territory. Help wanted, trail cook and camp tender. Room and board included. Fair wage. No mention of height required. It was her chance. She kissed her ma's forehead goodbye, tied her meager belongings into a canvas roll, and boarded the westbound stage with nothing but hope, a cast-iron skillet, and the kind of grit you couldn't wash off with 1,000 desert rains. The outfit was called the Double K. A rugged bunch, real trail-worn, all mustaches and sunburns, smelling of leather and horse sweat. The foreman squinted at her when she arrived. "You the new cook?" he asked, looking at her boots, which were half a size too small and patched with thread. "I am. You're taller than expected." "I hear that a lot." He scratched his beard. "You can ride?" "Nope. Cook. Better in most." He grunted. "Well, long as you keep us fed and don't spook the horses, you'll do." And just like that, Hannah Holt, the girl too tall for tea parties and church benches, became the only woman riding with the roughest cattle crew in the territory. What she didn't know, not yet, was that among those riders was a quiet cowpoke named Eli Booker, a man who spoke little, rode even less fast, and had a past stitched up with loss. He saw her first through the campfire smoke, standing like a lone pine in a field of tumbleweeds, stirring beans in a dented pot. And just like that, his heart, tough as saddle leather, gave one lopsided thump. But love ain't fast, not out here. It walks slow, careful, like a green coal feelin' out the trail. And this was only the beginning. Eli Booker weren't what you'd call loud. Didn't drink much, didn't gamble, didn't holler like the other boys when the cattle stampeded or when coyotes howled in the night. He just was. Sat his horse like he was born in the saddle and moved like a shadow across the plains, quiet, steady, sure. He'd come from Tennessee, or maybe Texas. Stories differed depending on who was talking. Folks said he'd been a tracker in the war. Others said he used to ride shotgun on a stagecoach through Apache country. Truth was, nobody knew much, and Eli never offered more than a shrug and a "don't rightly matter now." But the first day Hannah set up camp, elbows deep in biscuit dough, Eli noticed 2 things. First, she could cook. Second, she weren't afraid of much. When the others were snickering over her height or making fool jokes, she kept her chin up and her ladle swinging like a saber. Eli admired that. A lot of folks, men especially, saw her size and thought awkward. Eli saw strength, saw the way she carried buckets with one hand, bent over the fire without flinching, stood straight in the wind like she was carved from mountain stone. He started finding reasons to linger near the cook fire. Not talking, mind you, just being close. One night, he offered her some dried sage for the stew. Didn't say much else, but she gave him a soft thank you and a smile that burned hotter than the beans. Time passed. The trail was rough. Dust clung to every crevice. Boots wore thin, tempers frayed. But every night, Hannah cooked. Every morning, she cleaned. And in between, she started to notice Eli. He didn't joke like the others, didn't show off, but he always brought in firewood, always lifted the heaviest sacks without being asked. And once, when a storm rolled in hard from the west, it was Eli who helped her tie down the tarp and shield the food from the rain. "You always this quiet?" she asked him one night, the fire crackling low, stars hanging like lanterns overhead. He shrugged. "Talking ain't always useful. Listening is." She chuckled. "You got that from a book?" "Nope," he said, eyes glinting, with just the faintest smirk. "Got it from my granddad. He said most men open their mouths, for they open their eyes." She liked that. Liked him, more than she meant to. But it weren't all peaceful. One morning, a hand named Jeb made a joke a little too rough, about how maybe Hannah ought to pull the wagons instead of the mules. Eli didn't raise his voice, didn't stand up fast, just walked over slow, looked Jeb dead in the eye and said, "Say that again. I'll teach you what tall folk learn when they gotta look down to fight." Jeb backed off. Hannah didn't say anything, but later that night, she left a second helping of stew by Eli's spot, still hot. He tipped his hat to her when he saw it. That was all. But it was enough. They say the trail can wear a man down, grind the soul thin. But sometimes it also brings folks together, build something out of hardship that wouldn't grow in easier soil. That night, as coyotes yipped in the distance and the herd settled low, Hannah sat beside Eli on a log, neither saying much. Just two souls built a little different from the world around them. And for the first time in a long time, both felt like maybe, just maybe, they weren't alone no more. Out there on the Cholia Trail, storms come quick. Don't knock polite. Just roar over the hills, like stampedes with thunder on their heels. And on one such day, it rolled and mean, big and black as sin. The Double K riders were strung out across the arroyo, trying to drive a stubborn herd of longhorns through a dry wash when the wind shifted and the sky opened up. Hannah had just set her pot to boil when the rain hit. It were to sprinkle. It was a wall of water, a biblical flood kind of affair. The canvas over the chuck wagon went flapping like a madman's coat, and the fire hissed out faster than a man's temper on poker night. "Grab the tarp!" someone hollered, but most were already scattering like chickens in a foxhole. All but Eli. He came running through the downpour, boots sinking in the mud, and without a word started hauling down the mess gear, helping her wrestle canvas like they were trying to lasso the sky itself. She lost her footing once, slipped in the muck, but he caught her, arms solid as oak, eyes locked on hers through the rain. For half a second, the world stood still. "You all right?" he asked, voice low against the roar. "I'm fine," she lied. He nodded and helped her up, his hand lingering just a heartbeat too long before he let go. When the storm passed, the trail was a wreck. The herd was scattered, the wagon wheel cracked, and tempers flared worse than ever. One of the riders, a wiry fella named Hatch, blamed Hannah for not keeping the fire going. "What good's a cook if she can't keep the stew hot?" he snapped, tossing aside a soaked bedroll. Hannah bristled, jaw tight. "You think stew's gonna stop the sky from falling, Hatch?" He stepped toward her. "I think you ought to remember who does the real work out here." Before she could reply, Eli stepped between them. "You trying to say haulin' pots and feedin' 12 grown men through wind, dust, and hellfire ain't real work?" he said, voice like gravel. Hatch looked like he might argue, but one glance at Eli's set shoulders and that quiet look in his eyes, and he turned away, grumbling. Later that night, Eli found Hannah near the edge of camp, sitting on a log, hands resting on her knees, hair damp and tangled. She didn't look up when he sat beside her. "Don't let men like Hatch get to you," he said. "Most folks only talk big when they feel small." She glanced sideways at him. "You think I'm tough enough for this life?" He smiled slow. "I think you're built for it. Not cause of your height, because of your heart." She looked away quick. The kind of look folks give when something sharp and soft hits em at once. "You ever feel like you just don't fit anywhere?" she asked. Eli was quiet a long time. Then softly, "Every day till I met you." That stole her breath a little. He stood then, tipped his hat low. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's gonna ride hard." She watched him walk back toward the firelight, his silhouette cutting strong through the fading mist. And for the first time since leaving Pine Knot, Hannah Holt didn't feel too tall. She felt just right. The trail rolled on, dry and unforgiving. Dust clung to their boots, their skin, their very bones. Cattle bawled low and mournful, and the riders grew lean and mean from sun and saddle. But through it all, Hannah kept that campfire burning, and Eli kept showing up, like a shadow that didn't mind the heat. It weren't just stew and coffee anymore. She'd started slipping him little things, a biscuit set aside, a strip of bacon tucked in a napkin. He didn't ask, just took it with that quiet nod of his and eyes that said more than words ever could. But the closer they drew, the further he pulled back. He started riding farther up the line during the day. Camped just out of reach come night. Didn't linger like he used to by the cook fire. And it gnawed at her, something fierce, 'cause she'd seen that look in his eyes before. Not just the want, but the fear behind it. The kind of fear that don't come from rejection, but from wanting something too much and believing you ain't allowed to have it. One night, while the rest of the boys played cards and passed a jug, Hannah wandered out past the bedrolls, toward the edge of camp. There was a rise there, overlooking the valley, the moon hanging like a lantern in the sky. She found Eli there, sitting on a flat rock, legs stretched, arms folded, looking like he was carving something into the sky with just his eyes. "You always run when things get warm?" she asked, not unkind. He didn't flinch. Just said, "Not running. Just don't want to burn. Some fire's worth the scorch," she said. He looked at her then. Really looked. "You don't know what I done," he said, voice low. "No," she said, sitting beside him. "But I know who you are now." A silence fell between them, deep and thick like a summer dusk. "I seen things," he said finally. "Did things in the war I don't talk about. Then afterward tried settling. But settling don't always mean peace." She listened. Just listened. That's what he needed. "I had a wife once," he added after a beat. "She left. Said I was too quiet. Too broken. Then she didn't know strength when she saw it," Hannah said. He gave a dry chuckle. "She said I made her feel small." Hannah looked away, jaw tight. Folks always talk about small like it's a prize. "You ever wish you were shorter?" he asked, half joking. "Only when passing through doorways." They both laughed then. Low, easy. The kind that don't need much. Then she stood. "You're not broken, Eli. Bent, maybe. Like me. But bent things hold tighter. Don't you forget it." She left him sitting there, jaw slack, thoughts racing like wild horses. And when he lay down that night, he stared at the stars a long time. In the morning, when she woke to the smell of coffee, she found her skillet already clean and the firewood stacked neat. On top sat a single wildflower, blue as dusk. No note, no name. But she didn't need one. Now the Cholla Trail don't forgive mistakes. Couple weeks out from the last post, and the herd was getting ornery. Days were hot, nights cold, and every man was run ragged. When cattle get spooked, they bolt like the devils at their heels. And that's just what happened one midnight under a blood moon sky. It started with a snap, a mesquite branch cracking in the dark. Then the thunder came. Not from the clouds, mind you. From hooves. 200 head of longhorns, snorting, kicking, moving as one, stampeding through the camp like a runaway freight. Tents ripped loose, the chuck wagon tipped, and Hannah's fire went cold in an instant. She woke with a shout, boots flying, barely dodging a panicked steer. Men were hollering, riding hard, trying to turn the herd. Eli was already gone, leaning low over his saddle, eyes fixed and steady, like a bullet with a purpose. But Hannah, she was cornered. The wagon had pinned her leg, just enough to keep her stuck, while the stampede barreled straight her way. The look in her eyes weren't fear, it was resignation. Like she'd faced enough already, and if this was the end, so be it. Then came the sound. Hooves. Fast and furious. And a voice that cut through the roar. Hang on. Eli. He charged in, dust flying, leaned low from his saddle like a man twice his size, and in one motion, one impossibly smooth, reckless, stupid motion, he hooked his arm around Hannah's middle and yanked her clean off the ground. They tumbled together, hard and messy, rolling into the thorn brush, just as the herd thundered past, in a blur of hooves and horns and terror. When it was over, the air was thick with dust and silence. Hannah lay there, breathless, Eli's body half shielding hers, his arms around her like a man who didn't ever plan on letting go. "You all right?" he whispered hoarse. "I think so," she gasped. "You," he coughed. "I've had better days." She laughed. "Just a little." Later, back at camp, they patched her up best they could. Just a bruised leg and a scrape or two. Eli had a busted lip, but he never mentioned it. The other hands talked about it for days. Said they'd never seen nothing like it. That Eli rode like he weren't afraid of death if it meant Savon, that tall girl cook. Hannah didn't say much about it, but that night, she sat beside Eli by the fire and didn't leave when the others turned in. She leaned into his shoulder, warm and solid, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. "Why'd you do it?" she asked soft. He thought a long time. "'Cause you're the only thing on this trail that makes me want to come back alive." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She just reached over, took his calloused hand, and held it like it was something precious. And in the flicker of that fire, two folks who thought they were too broken, too bent, too much or not enough, sat still and found out maybe, just maybe, they were just right. After the stampede, the trail slowed some. Not the ride itself. That was still rough and dusty. But something in the way folks looked at Hannah changed. Used to be, they'd glance up and snicker, whisper jokes about her long legs, or call her Hightower, when they thought she wasn't listening. But after Eli's ride into thunder, after they saw him hold her like a man holds his whole world, well, those voices got quiet. Ain't nothing silences a man like watching another risk it all, without a second thought. One morning, as she stirred coffee over fresh embers, Hank, the oldest hand, wrinkled like saddle leather, tipped his hat and said, "You got more grit than half the boys out here. Glad you're riding with us." It weren't much, but it was the first kind word from the crew she'd ever been given. She smiled soft. "Thanks, Hank." Later, as the sun climbed high and cattle lumbered forward in the heat, Eli rode up beside her wagon. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "Legs better. Wagon wheels not." He hopped down without a skin, gave it a once-over, and with a grunt, rolled up his sleeves. She watched the muscles in his arms ripple as he braced a jack and lifted the busted wheel. Quiet, focused, kind. "I don't like debts," he said without looking up. "You think Savon my life was a favor?" she asked. He glanced over, his eyes glinting. "No, I think it was instinct." They didn't say more, but that night she laid a blanket out near the fire. One extra spot, just wide enough for two. And wouldn't you know it, come moonrise, Eli sat down beside her, shoulders brushing. Not close enough to scandal, but just close enough to know he was staying. They talked some about small things. Where they'd been, how she used to climb trees and scare off boys back home, how he'd once wanted to be a blacksmith till the war took that future away. It was easy, like drawing breath after a long time underwater. Then she said, real quiet, "You ever think about after this?" He looked up at the stars. "Sometimes," he said, "but most dreams don't come with saddle sores and chapped hands." "Mine do," she said, grinning. "They also come with fried bread and strong coffee." He chuckled. "You planning on cooking for Cowboys forever?" She shook her head. "No, I'm planning on building something of my own. A place. Tall doorways, strong fences, maybe even a porch swing." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a long breath, they said nothing. But in the quiet, it was clear as dawn. He didn't just see her height or her strength. He saw her, and he was Fallon. Slow as honey, but Fallon all the same. The next town they rolled into was a sun-baked speck called Larkspur Bend. Half a dozen buildings leaning like they'd survived one too many gunfights. The cattle were thin from trail miles, and so were the men. They needed supplies, rest, and a break from saddle sores. Hannah set up shop behind the livery, cooking over a low flame, while Eli helped repair harnesses. The rest of the crew drifted into town like tumbleweeds toward trouble, cards, whiskey, and women. But trouble didn't wait in Larkspur Bend. It rode in, came in on a dust-stained horse, lean and mean, with eyes like shale and a smile sharp as a rusty knife. Name was Clay Mallory. Folks called him Mallory the Mean. Used to run with a gang, but rumor had it he turned bounty hunter when shooting outlaws got more profitable than being one. He walked right up to the cook fire like he owned the sky. "Well now," he said, eyeing Hannah up and down. "Ain't you something? You built to scare off bears, or just every man in 50 miles?" She didn't rise, didn't blink, just stirred her pot. "Move along," Eli said behind him, voice flat. Mallory turned, slow. His smirk curled. "Well, look who's crawled out of the grave. Didn't think I'd find Eli Booker riding trail again." Eli stiffened. His hand didn't go near his gun, but it didn't have to. That stillness of his, it was louder than a bullet. "You know him?" Hannah asked, her voice steady but low. Mallory chuckled. "Oh, I knew him. Back before he went all silent and holy. This man used to run with a long-draw gang, until he disappeared the night the law closed in." Eli didn't deny it, just said, "That life's behind me." Mallory's eyes narrowed. "Is it? 'Cause I got a bounty slip says otherwise. Eli Booker, alive. 500 in gold." The air grew tight. "You here for the money?" Eli asked. Mallory leaned in cocky. "I'm here for the fun." That's when Hannah stood, all 6 foot and near 3 inches of her, tall, straight, and dangerous as a drawn bow. "You'll leave," she said, "or I'll see how far I can throw a skillet." Mallory stared, then laughed. "You threatening me, tall girl?" "No," she said. "I'm promising." Mallory spat in the dirt. "Fine. You 2 lovebirds want to play house. Go ahead. But you can't outrun what you are, Booker." And he walked off, hat low, boots dragging dust. Eli sat down slow, hands clenched. "You okay?" Hannah asked. He nodded. "Was bound to catch me someday." "You done with that life?" "Long ago." She looked at him hard. "Then don't flinch." He met her eyes, and for the first time, the shame in him didn't hide. It just didn't win either. "I ain't leaving," she said, voice like warm iron. Eli reached across the space between them, and this time, it wasn't a brush of fingers. It was his hand in hers. Solid. "Sure. I won't run," he said. She smiled. "Good, 'cause I'm too tall to chase." They left Larkspur Bend at first light. Sky was bruised with clouds, low and heavy, like it knew what was coming. The herd moved slow, nervous. The men spoke less, and Eli rode like a man waiting for a storm to break. By sundown, that storm came. But it didn't come from the sky. It came from the ridgeline. 3 riders, faces wrapped in scarves, eyes mean. And in front rode Clay Mallory, sitting tall in the saddle like a man with death in his holster. "Eli Booker," he called, voice like gunpowder. "Time to finish this." The crew scattered, grabbing rifles, taking cover behind bedrolls and saddlebags. Hannah stood by the cook fire, unarmed but unflinching. Eli stepped forward, slow and sure. "I ain't running, Mallory." Mallory dismounted, boots hitting the dirt hard. "Good. I hate chasing ghosts." He drew. Eli didn't. Not yet. He just looked at Hannah once. "Whatever happens, shut up and win," she said. Mallory fired first. The shot cracked through the canyon like a whip. Eli dropped low, rolled, and came up firing. His bullet caught Mallory high in the shoulder, spun him sideways. The other 2 riders panicked. One bolted. The other hesitated, long enough for Hannah to grab the skillet off the fire and throw it like a comet. It caught him square in the jaw, dropped him like a sack of feed. The dust settled. Mallory lay in the dirt, groaning, blood seeping through his coat. Eli stood over him, gun steady. "This is over." Mallory spat. "You'll always be an outlaw." Eli holstered his gun. "Maybe. But I'm done running. And I ain't alone." He turned to Hannah. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright. She walked to him, tall and proud, and for the first time in all her days, she didn't feel too much. She felt enough. Later, around a fresh fire, the men muttered praise, shook Eli's hand, clapped Hannah's back like she was one of their own. Someone patched up Mallory and tied him proper. He'd ride to justice come morning. But that night, under a sky full of stars, Eli and Hannah sat shoulder to shoulder. No words. No need. Finally, he said, "I ain't got land. I ain't got money." She smiled. "I ain't looking for a banknote, Eli. I'm looking for a man who sees me." He reached up, touched her cheek. "I see you." She leaned in close. "And I ain't done looking." With Mallory gone and the trail behind him, the Double K outfit finished their drive and split ways near Sand Hollow. Most of the hands took their wages and vanished into the saloons or back to ranches that'd barely remember come winter. But Hannah Holt, she had different plans. She stood at the edge of a dry creek bed, looking out over a flat stretch of land with wild sage and good sun. It weren't much, but she saw something there. A house, a garden, maybe a barn, something built with her own hands, not borrowed from a world that never fit her right. Eli came up behind her, his hat low, his voice quiet. "You sure?" he asked. "Ain't nothing out here but hard work." She nodded. "Then it's perfect." They pooled what they had, trail wages, a few coins from a silver buckle Eli never wore, and the last of the money her ma had stitched into the lining of her coat. Together, they started building. The house went up slow, one board at a time. Eli worked the saw. Hannah lifted beams like they was toothpicks. He teased her once, said she could wrestle a bear and win. She told him she'd already wrangled him. They built the door extra tall, the porch wide, and when it was done, it stood proud and simple against the horizon, like it had always been there waiting on him. At night, they'd sit on the steps, her long legs stretched out, his shoulder tucked to hers. They'd talk sometimes. Mostly didn't have to. One evening, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a little ring, copper and leather braided, rough and honest. "I ain't got no preacher," he said, "but I got this. And a promise." She blinked. "What kind of promise?" "That no matter how tall the world thinks you are, I'll always reach for you first." Her breath caught like a lasso. Then she nodded, and they married right there, under a sky wide enough to hold them both. Life after that wasn't easy. They had lean winters and dry summers. A calf died. A chimney collapsed in a storm. Eli broke 2 ribs fallin' off a ladder. But the house held. And so did they. And folks started talking. Not in whispers, but in wonder. They'd ride past and point to the tall woman chopping, wood with her hair in a braid and a skillet on the stove. They'd tip their hats to the quiet man who rode into town with a scarred past and a steady gait. "You seen them too?" they'd ask. "She was too tall for every man in town," someone would say, until that cowboy showed up and stood tall enough to match. Years passed like pages in a worn book, soft at the edges, but never forgotten. Hannah and Eli's ranch, which started with little more than calloused hands and crooked nails, grew into a place folks came to know by name. High Range. Folks came for miles around for her apple bread, for his quiet advice. They never had much, but what they did have they shared. Extra seeds in spring, shelter in storms, a place at their table. Hannah planted trees along the ridge, the kind that grew slow and wide, with branches that reached high like her. And every spring, wildflowers bloomed at the edge of the porch, her favorite spot to sit, rockin' slow. Eli's hat always resting on the post beside her. One summer, a little girl came riding up with a busted boot and eyes too sharp for her age. Said her pa had left, her ma was sick, and she didn't know where else to go. Hannah didn't hesitate. She brought the girl inside, set her by the fire, and said, "This is a house for folks who've been told they don't fit." Eli built her a bunk with his own hands. Hannah stitched her dresses long, so they'd grow with her. They never called her daughter out loud, but that's what she became, sure as sunrise. Years later, folks would ride past High Range and point to the woman on the porch, tall as a sapling and twice as strong. The kids called her Miss Holt, or just Tall Hannah. With a smile. "Is it true?" they'd ask. That she was too tall for courtin'? That no man dared ask her dance, till one looked up and saw an angel. And the older folks would nod. Ain't just a story, they'd say. It's the truth. A cowboy rode into her life, looked up, and never looked away again. By the time her hair turned silver and Eli's step slowed, the house stood taller than ever, painted fresh, windows bright, and the porch still fastened west, watching the sky for whatever came next. When Eli passed, it was a quiet thing. No storm, just peace. Hannah sat beside him, holding his hand like she had the day he pulled her from the path of stampeding hooves. She whispered stories into his stillness, thanked him for seeing her when nobody else did. Then she built a bench beneath the tallest tree they planted, with a plaque that read, "To the man who reached up and held my heart." She never remarried. Didn't need to. Some loves are wide enough to last lifetimes, even after the boots stop walking. And when Hannah Holt finally laid down her burden, years later, they buried her in the field just east of the house. Upright, they said, 'cause it felt right, and the wildflowers bloomed all around. So ends the tale of the tall girl they said would never be loved. But love don't come in size. It comes in reach. And Hannah Holt, she reached higher than most ever dared. The end. Sheaf of rice.